Badger fans, we got that guy coming back on the show. We have a lot of commitments to talk about. We haven't had Brian Smith on to talk about Clayton, Telemaque, Pettaway, Washington, plus maybe an early look at a 2026 quarterback. Lots to get into on Wisconsin. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Badger fans, what is going on? Thank you so much with a capital exclamation point and capital T's for tuning in, for being part of this community, for joining us. I really appreciate it. For all the everydayers, thank you so much. Today's episode brought to you by the Game Time app. Create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Let's just get into it. Whenever we have Brian on the show, we do not waste any time because we have valuable things to talk about. We've got defensive linemen, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, that's within itself, the way things have gone since I met you is surprising. But a few of them are actually pretty decent. That's the other thing. So the things are getting better in Madison. What's going on?
Things to talk about. I'm excited to have you on this week. We don't have to go through the same thing of where are they? Can't get them. Why? Let's talk Clayton. Let's start with Nicolas Clayton. 6'5-ish, 220, 230. Edge out of Gainesville, Florida. Probably going to be more of that edge guy. Big motor. Love the frame. Love the athleticism. What were your thoughts watching him on film?
I laughed because he plays in Gainesville. Florida didn't go after him. Florida State did until the end. They thought they were getting the kid that ends up committing to Ohio State that's from Alabama, which is just random, named Zion Grady. They thought they were getting him. They passed on that kid. And right after Zion Grady commits to Ohio State. So Wisconsin, lo and behold, they're just sitting there. That kid was going to go to Florida State, flat out, and they screwed it up. Wisconsin's benefit is Florida State's mess up. Hey, take advantage, bro. That kid can play. First step explosiveness is exactly what I've been talking about. Wisconsin never gets. The length that this kid has, Wisconsin never gets. The kids that they want and need are exemplified by this young man. He may not be the best player in the class. I don't know how it'll end up. He very well may be the most important player in the class because you have to have position balance. And especially when it's a premium position, meaning weak side, bend your shoulder, get underneath the tackle, run by him, just sheer athlete, edge rusher. Wisconsin's not very good at recruiting those guys. This kid is all of that and a ball of wax. And I think he will rise in the rankings because his film's really good. The only problem is, again, he plays in Gainesville. For those of you who don't know, Gainesville, Florida is not a mecca for recruiting analysts. It's just where the University of Florida is at. But it's north central Florida. It's away from the cities and stuff. They don't get any attention. If he played in Tampa, where I lived, etc., he would have been ranked a lot higher. But he's up in Gainesville. It's probably one of the reasons Wisconsin got him, too, because not as many schools that fly in from other states. Nobody recruits Gainesville. It's just the local schools. It's bizarre, but it's true. That kid is a steal and one of the best players in Florida nobody talks about.
Yeah, it's funny because of the offer list, because of a little bit of the lack of hype, the ranking. When I first watched his film, I didn't expect to like him as much as I did. Right? I didn't expect to see the burst, the motor. He runs plays down on the backside. He doesn't give up on the ball. He gets his hands on passes. He's got a long frame. He just feels like the prototypical edge guy that's going to be disruptive. It feels like a home run gift for the Badgers.
This kid can play at Ohio State, Notre Dame, USC, Texas, Alabama. I'm fully in on that. But the rankings aren't going to show it. I know fans want to go to their office and talk crap to their friend that doesn't root for the same school about that. They're not going to be able to do that yet. But the film doesn't lie. He runs by guys and makes them look bad, period. He's got a really good, just bend, natural. This kid could have been a wrestler. He could have been a baseball player. It wouldn't have mattered. He'd have figured it out in anything. He's just an athlete. But you can tell because of what you said that he loves football. Because there are plays, no matter how good you are, they just run it the other direction. Chances you making the tackle are pretty slim. This kid still runs hard. It means something to him. That is one thing that Wisconsin rarely has a problem with. They got kids that play hard. He'll fit in. And the other thing is he's going to be faster than most of the kids he's going to be playing with too. So this is an athlete they don't normally get. They need him to find a way to play early. This is not going to be a redshirt guy. If they can get him coached up on the scheme, again, they just don't get this guy. They don't. They need him to be a hit because they're not going to get a ton of them, especially out of Florida. This might be the only edge rusher they get out of Florida the next 25 years. They need to make sure this kid hits.
Why do you think why do you think Florida didn't, in the backyard, seen a kid like him? Why do you think they maybe passed up?
Have you seen Billy Napier coach lately?
I've heard from Locked. Listen, I talked to Olsen over at Locked On Gators.
They are the idiotic program that sends guys out on the field for special teams with the same jersey number. Okay? They can't get out of their own way. It's the University of Florida football program. If you need entertainment, just go to YouTube. I promise you will be entertained. That's all I'm going to say.
So we're not going to stress that too much.
No.
Talk to me about the other Florida kid, Opalaka. We talked about him before he committed, but we haven't talked to him since he committed. Wilnerson Telemaque, bigger frame, 6'6", 260. Thoughts on him again, now that he is in the Badgers class?
Well, it's interesting. He told me he's 250. I messaged with him today. He's in great shape. I'd seen him a few months back. He's put in the effort. I don't know what position he's going to play is the only question. He's been about the same size for 2 years. Most kids keep getting bigger. He was a little chunky before. Now he's just leaning and everything. I don't know what he's going to play. Is it going to be strong side or 3-tech? Depends on what they want to do with him, but he is 6'6". I mean, he's a big dude. And he loves football. He's extremely long. He's got arms you would think like, oh, this is a basketball player. He's got those kind of length with his arms. I don't know if he's going to end up being inside, though. And I'm curious if that's one of the reasons Wisconsin liked him, because they play a combination. Sometimes they run 3-man, sometimes they run 4-man in the schemes that they've had prior. Now, I don't know if this year they'll kind of settle on one more than the other, but I think he could be a good defensive end in a 3-man where you just take angles, just go with the gap and just use your size and length and just do it. It's kind of what Kirby and Nick did for a long time. And he could also be a guy that could, with his length, be a strong side end in a 4-3, be a power guy. So the only thing with him is he's not like super explosive. Miami, Florida State did not go after him. He's a step slower than what they wanted those, and those schools get to pick the elite D lineman for the most part. But there's a lot of upside with him, and he wanted to prove people wrong. He had sent me a message 2 months ago, something, because I'd been by his school the year before or whatever. He says, hey, are you coming by? He wants the attention. He wants to prove that he's really good. It means something to him. So I'm curious to see what he ends up doing, because he's a great guy, and he thinks he's been overlooked. He's got a chip on his shoulder. It's a great story.
Well, the frame, and you mentioned the frame, he's got crazy long arms, so he can keep climbing off of them. He feels like a guy who, in the Big Ten, in a couple years, could be 270, 275, 280, and really set the edge against an Iowa, really set the edge against the Michigan, those type of schools. And you need that. You need guys who can come in there and be physical. Does that feel like the projection for him, or does he maybe have a higher ceiling than that?
That's what I'm not sure. I need to see, like, the way he looks is one thing. Last summer, I saw him at Miami's camp, and he'd lost the weight, and I was like, somebody said that's who it was. I'm like, that is him. Like, I literally didn't recognize him. He walked right in front of me, and I know him personally. He just had a helmet on, so I didn't see his face, but I'm like, oh, okay. Can he play at another level in terms of foot speed? That is purely the only reason he's not going to one of the big three. Let's cut to the chase. He'd have went to one, probably would have went to Miami. But if he can take another step in terms of just raw speed, this is a guy that you can do all kinds of things with, because you can't teach the length, can't teach the height, and I guarantee he's got a motor. I know him. If he can do that, he can be more than just a run stuff. Right now, it's otherwise proven, because the number of guys that are speed rushers is so limited. It's insane. That's why the kid I just talked about a second ago, the other kid in Florida, that's the guy that's more important, because he's a pure dip his shoulder, get under the offensive tackle, and go around and bend the edge guy. I think Wilnerson's going to be a strong side end and plays to run better than he does to pass. That's my first guess. But if they're going to play him in 3-man line, or you're going to slant, you're going to just send him on an angle, do some stunts and stuff, he can cause havoc, but I just don't think it'll be as much sacks as it will be creating for other players in the defense.
Right. And, the one thing with him too, and I mentioned this before, you get a guy with his wingspan, 6'6", 6'7", 6'5", somewhere in there, those short little, passes to the tight end, the running back, those little slants to the receivers, all that gets more congested. Wow. Right. Yeah. And you got to stockpile some guys like that too. All right, we're going to come back. We got Torin Pettaway we're going to talk about next, Jamari Washington, all that coming up with Brian Smith over on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at Game Time. We talk about Game Time a lot. Game Time is the number one source for all of your tickets, whatever you need from any venue. You want to take the misses out to a concert and earn some brownie points. Listen, this is the time to do it. Football season's coming up. You need your weekends free. Right now, it's time to earn brownie points. Take the misses to, or the Mr. whoever it is, take them to concerts, theaters, comedy, whatever it is, pick up some brownie points. So when football starts, you have it to yourself. Go over to Game Time, get the tickets, whatever you need. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDON20 or LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off the first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. The best place in the world to buy your tickets. The biggest inventory. The best prices, the least logistical pain over at Game Time. Today's episode is also brought to you by our great friends over at LinkedIn. LinkedIn remains the number one source for all of your hiring needs. If you're a hiring manager, you're trying to find somebody for your company, LinkedIn is the place to do it. It's the largest network in the world. It's incredibly easy to use. It's fast. It's simple. They have screening tools to get rid of people who have no business applying for your job. Ranked number one in hiring from small businesses for basically the last 5 years. LinkedIn's where you got to go to find the right talent. Find the 5-star plumber, the 5-star taxi driver, the 5-star concrete guy, the 5-star accountant, whatever you need for your business over at LinkedIn. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Post your job for free. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, let's get Mr. Brian back on. Let's talk Torin Pettaway. Let's talk another front seven defensive line. Pettaway, 6'5", 6'6", up to 280. Now, hasn't played a lot of ball. I know you got to love that frame.
It's what you're looking for. That's the kind of kid that goes to Georgia, goes to Tennessee, goes to Kentucky or Florida State or something, plays in one of the schools in Dixie. And it's the difference between why they win and lose. They have more of them than everybody else. This kid was in state, and I remember making fun of you because you'd lost him to freaking Minnesota for a while. That's never acceptable. Cannot lose recruits to Minnesota.
I remember
That is a no. That's a hard no. That program is not very good. If you aspire to greatness, losing recruits to Minnesota is a great way not to get there. Now that he's in there and you got Telemaque, you got Clayton, okay, now you got a little bit of something to go with this group. The only thing's missing, and there are about 3 of these a year in the country, is the 6'3", 330 guy that Georgia and Alabama want too. Good luck with that. Mm-hmm. But overall, it's a really good group. The only other thing that I will add to this, and this is something that pretty much everybody has to do, even Michigan, Notre Dame, and most of the schools that are high up on the ladder that are on that edge but not quite elite. Most years, of course, Michigan was last year, but usually aren't, is finding the 6'4", 240, 250 kid that hasn't filled out yet. Wisconsin's been tremendous at it in the last 30 years. They need another guy like that in this class. And it's okay if it's a kid from South Dakota or wherever. Me first, I'm going to take care of myself. My body's going to be perfect. This nutso Marine kind of guy to mix in with them. They can get up to 275. You need another big body. And you need that in every class. You got to have at least 2 monsters in every class if you're going to take that next step as a program. But like compared to where Wisconsin was 2 weeks ago and now is Mars to the United States, okay? Because D-line recruiting was embarrassing until all this just happened. And they just went nuts. Good for them. They stuck with their plan, and they got some really good players. So I think it's a pretty good sign, man, because I think Pettaway could be your three tech next Telemaque. And that's – I mean, it's not what Georgia's going to have, but it's the next notch below, and nobody has what Georgia has. So it is what it is. They can go to major bowl games and at least compete with Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State with this kind of D-line recruiting. And that's bottom line. So I won't have to make fun of you as much about D-line recruiting for the next few weeks.
I love it, man. And listen, we picked up Eugene Hilton Jr., so you lay off me with boundary receiver for a little bit.
There you go.
Cornerback. Let me ask you this. You get this group here. Last year, Ernest Willer Jr., we talked about quite a bit. Dylan Johnson, the 4-star kind of defensive tackle wrestler. So back-to-back classes, and they also picked up Hank Weber last year. He's probably more of that lunch pail type guy from Tennessee.
That's fine. Getting one of those guys every year is good. That's okay.
Does this feel like, and here, let me just segue into this question. You kind of just hit on it, but this is from Wisco Fanatic. Is this the type of players they need to win battles to, or do they still need to win battles for a player like a level above on the defensive line? And I think you just kind of hit on this.
If you want to not just compete with Ohio State on the field, you have to beat them for defensive line. Now, here's the problem. What do you think the going rate is for a 5-star defensive tackle in the South?
Probably more than I make on this podcast.
That is a low bar.
Yeah, it is.
$500K would be nothing.
Right.
They're not coming unless you're buying. I guarantee you Georgia's buying. Their pocket is endless. I know how this game works. Auburn, Ole Miss, and stuff. Their fans get mad if they're not cheating. So and I'm not lying. There has to be a way to get the elite player out of the high school ranks that those schools want. There is absolutely, unequivocally no shortcut to match player for player. Like I'm sure you've heard some of the numbers that Ohio State spent on their NIL. Somebody said like 31 million. I don't know if that's true or not, if that's based over 4 years, how that works, like whatever. But at some point, if you're going to get over the top, you still need to get at least one of those guys that even like Notre Dame, Penn State struck because they don't pay as much for NIL either, but they're a higher level program than Wisconsin. There's a very small market. The edge rusher, though, that's the hardest one to get because there are very few of those two. Most guys get too big and end up being strong side ends. And you could at least take big defensive ends and move them to D tackle. But the 330-pound nose guard guy, that kind of thing, if Wisconsin with their staff, if they had that guy like a draftable player at nose that was 320 that could change it. They've had a few of them actually in the last 5 years. When they were running the 3-4, they had a guy that was massive. It was really good. They got to find somebody like that. That's really more important than the ranking. Who was it? The Davis kid that UGA had, the 6'6" kid, 3-4. He was a 3-star kid out of high school. Right. One of the guys on Kirby's staff had to say, like, we need to take – Kirby didn't even want to offer him for a long time because he was like 380 at one point. Like, he was a balloon, and he just worked hard. Some of those kind of kids can work too. But, again, like Justice Terry, I think, is the best pure prospect in the country this year. He's 6'4.5", 270, and runs like a running back. It's hilarious to see him play, by the way. He plays 1A football in Georgia. It is not Bill. Oh, it's hilarious. It's like a gnat getting hit by a Mack truck when he finds somebody. But that kid's not coming to Wisconsin. So you got to find something in that realm that maybe just takes an extra year. And that's where your strength and conditioning program comes in. I just don't see that question being relevant because they're just never going to get that guy unless that kid's in Wisconsin or maybe in Chicago. And even those kids are probably still going to want NIL. The kid last year ends up at Miami from Chicago. Miami has about as much NIL as anybody. He didn't even go to Ohio State. Miami still went to Ohio State. So that's the only thing left. I just don't know if you can do anything about it because NIL is out of control. Like $1 million for a player is not out of the question.
Well, and to your point, speaking of Georgia, Wisconsin and a lot of schools, not just Wisconsin, most schools need to find that guy who they can project to be that, who isn't currently that, because the guys that are currently that. And the player you're referencing that was really good for the Badgers a couple years ago, Keanu Benton. He played there 4 years, a 4-year starter, was drafted. He was a dude. But he was also from Wisconsin and overlooked.
But that's the thing. He was committed. This is something I'm trying to figure out how to chart this. He was committed to being a Badger, and part of that he was in state. That's okay. And that's why I was making fun of you with Pettaway, because if you lose that guy to Minnesota, I would have sent you mail. I would have done all kinds of things the rest of your life. Freaking Minnesota. That's terrible. So they're going to get that kid, and he's got a chance to be an NFL player. With as little as they have in state, anytime there's a defensive lineman, unless the kid's got his dad went to Michigan or something, okay, probably not going to get that guy. Other than that, they got to get him every time. There's only like one or two of them every decade in Wisconsin. One of the last guys that Kirby got at D-line lives 15 minutes from Athens, and he's 285 pounds. It's like, come on, man. So, it's not fair. Yeah, like my mom could recruit to Georgia. It's not hard. It's still the same point, though. Got to find, like you said, one guy a year at least, 240, 250, plays hard, Marine-like, kind of probably not the guy you want dating your daughter, but you want him to play defensive tackle. They got to find that guy. If you got an in-state kid, you got to get him. You got to get a Chicago kid. Probably got to beat Notre Dame or Michigan for him. That's not easy. Every time they're going to be the underdog, they still have to find a way to do it. That's where it comes. Like next year in Chicago is an elite year for defensive linemen. Notre Dame is in hard on all of them. Good luck beating Marcus Freeman out. They have to be able to do it. You're never going to catch Ohio State and Notre Dame if you don't beat them for recruits.
No, that's great insight. Let me ask you this. Two more quick kind of questions as we wrap up. A couple of people asked me if you had any insight on Rukeem Stroud flipping the cornerback four-star kid. We talked about on the show. Was from Wisconsin to UCF.
I know that school. I know him. I've been around him. I know the area. I lived in Tampa. Those kids, East Side Tampa, it's a very rough area. A lot of them just aren't ready to leave Florida. In Wisconsin, to them, might as well be Russia. So while it sounded good at the time to play in the Power 4, it's easier for him to get back and forth to Orlando. It's a 2-hour drive, instead of a plane flight. I really don't think anything to do with Wisconsin. This is the same problem Wisconsin's always had and will continue to have. Most kids just don't want to go that far. And there's 150 corners a year in the South when there's 12 in the Midwest. So when you have kids locally, you got to get them. Of course, the kid we're going to talk about here in a second, that's part of it. Jamari Washington, when you have a kid at Morgan Park, you got to get him. But it still would have been nice to get a Tampa kid too.
Yeah, it would have been nice to get a long corner, another long corner. All right, let's shift then to Jamari Washington. 6'1", 6'2" DB, playing some corner, really physical film. I like the physicality on it. What'd you think watching him on film?
He was one of the harder kids for me to figure out because, some of the film left a lot to be desired in terms of the quarterbacks he's playing against. I'm like, holy cow, these are ducks. But he picked them off. And he knew what to do with it. But your point about playing downhill and physical was more important. He plays more like a safety in terms of how he tackles, goes after running back, screen game. So he'll fit what the old Cincinnati scheme was. It's now Wisconsin in terms of being aggressive on defense. Their corners when they're with Cincinnati, that league wasn't very good. They ate people alive. Now it's going to be a little harder in the Big Ten, but the safeties and corners are still going to play downhill, I think, most of the time. They get beat. They're going to be aggressive. He fits it. Now, where does he play? Is he going to stay at corner? His frame tells me he could weigh 200 pounds. Maybe he's your nickel. Maybe he's your strong side. I don't know. But his ability to tackle is something that it's the same thing Freeman does at Notre Dame. They look at tackling at DB first. Most would say run and all this. He wants guys that are really physical, and it's the same. They coach together. I think it's the same deal. They're going to be really good in the box. They're going to take kids that are going to be able to blow up a screen. And they're going to be able to play the run. They'll teach technique and coverage. He's already got length and some athleticism. That's obviously just a natural thing you have to have at corner to even be in the conversation. He's got all those ingredients, but he plays at Morgan Park, not an area that's an easy place to grow up. I'll leave it at that. So he's been through it. This isn't going to be a kid that's scared of anything. Big Ten football will be easy compared to some of the things he's seen. Now he just has to go get the coaching and get better because he's got the length you're looking for. He looks like a Big Ten corner. He looks like the kid who plays at Michigan. That's the old Will Johnson. He looks like that kid. There's nothing wrong with that. So he's got all the tools.
Well, and you hit on the ball skills too. This is a kid who, up until a year ago, there were some thoughts. Is he going to be a receiver, corner? He definitely
he doesn't drop it, which drives me nuts.
I know. He's definitely not one of those dudes playing corner because he can't play receiver.
Exactly. You see the guys trying to get. It's just awkward. Oh, it's terrible. He catches the ball and it goes the other way. Oh, it's awful. But he has the ability to take the football the other direction, score. I wonder if he's a guy that might even do some kickoffs at some point. He's got natural running skills with the ball in his hands. Good football player is probably the best way to define it.
Let's finish up here. This kid's a little further out, but Jiren Mock, I think you had a chance to look at some of his film. 26 quarterback. Wisconsin did offer him the first Power 4 offer that he has gotten that came from Phil Longo recently. About 6'2", 6'1", 6'2", somewhere in that range. Thoughts on Jiren Mock watching him on film?
It's interesting. He's from Pickerington, which is on the east side of Columbus, Ohio. I'm sure you know what school is there, but they don't have a 26 quarterback yet. So I'm just going to set that up for later. Just throwing that out there. It's interesting because I watched his film and he's got what I call an easy arm. Sometimes when he throws it, think about you're at the lake and you're waiting on your buddy or something. You guys get ready to go swimming. You're just throwing rocks. You don't even use your hips. Well, he doesn't even have to try. He's got an arm. And his technique sometimes is just terrible, but he throws it so naturally and can drop it in the bucket. It's almost bad that he's able to do that because you don't want to continue with that down the line. But he's got an easy arm. He has natural touch on the deep ball. But when he wants to and he steps into a pass in the pocket, he's got some zip on a shorter throw when he has to get it in the tight window. All those things match. And I just kept going through and I'm like, is he going to run? Is he going to run? There was finally a play where he broke contain and he can go. He just prefers to stay in the pocket. But every now and then he's the guy that'll get you the 10 yards that you need to get 3rd and 7 that drives the defense coordinator crazy because they don't put a spy. He'll do that too. I think that's pretty much the dynamic. He's not as good an athlete, but Caleb Williams rarely ran for USC. But when he did, it was bad for you. This kid, I'm not saying he's Caleb Williams. I'll be very clear. But he'll drive you nuts because he'll make a guy miss, beat him to the sideline, and move the sticks. With
Mm-hmm.
his arm, if he could just gain weight, the reason he's not ranked higher, doesn't have more offers, he's a twig. He's got to eat. That's Wisconsin. They do a lot of that. He would be good up there in that regard. So this is the kind of guy they can steal out of Ohio. They're not going to offer him. Ohio State will go for a higher ranked kid, and they will get him. And Michigan's already got their quarterback. Penn State's already got their quarterback. Notre Dame's already got their quarterback in 26. Like literally, the Midwest is done with the elite program. So Wisconsin can come in there and be like the guy. Wouldn't be surprised if he was committed by the middle of this next season. He'll get other offers. He's a pretty good athlete. But again, he just doesn't have the natural frame filled out. If he was 195, he'd have 20 offers. He's 170. So he looks like a receiver, not a quarterback.
Yeah, you hit on something that I thought was really apropos watching the film. He just doesn't want to run. And
No.
That's so rare for a sophomore, because that's his sophomore film, for a quarterback at that age who can out-athlete people. It's just constantly head up, scanning the field. And I just know, having watched the Badgers play quarterbacks like that, having watched my NFL teams play quarterback, it drives you nuts because he just finds ways to extend, to hit a playmaker. Someone's going to break for your coverage. I thought he had a lot of poise for a young quarterback at that level. The footwork's a little weird. Like you said, like there's things to clean up, but just from like a clock standpoint, it doesn't feel like he panics or gets sped up.
Two things. Number one, he's at Pickerington. That area of football is life. I mean, it's Pickerington, but it's Columbus, Ohio. Okay, that if you're watching the show, you know what that means. He's also a kid that does have natural feel. When a guy's like his offensive lineman screws up or just gets beat, he will slide while keeping his head down the field. That is rare for a lot of NFL quarterbacks. Suck at that. Nobody wants to get hit. I don't care what you teach the guy, scream out. Nobody wants to get hit. Their eyes go down and they're looking just to get the heck out of Dodge because they don't want to feel pain. I get it. He'll still move and try to throw before he gets hit. Like it means something to him to be a quarterback first, not an athlete first. And he can run. So the only thing I'm curious about, because I didn't see enough of his film, maybe, is he okay with running RPO and running up the middle some? To maximize what he can do, there is no shortcut. He's got to take those hits. Urban did that a lot with Ohio State. Fake like outside zone. The DN went out. There was any kind of like, it's 5 yards every time for the quarterback. 2nd and 5, you call whatever you want. And Ohio State just murdered people with that. And now, of course, a lot of teams do it. If he can do that with his natural arm strength, this is the kind of guy that in 3 years out of high school could be the best player at his position in the Big Ten. It wouldn't shock me because he'd be a true dual threat. Just I don't know if he wants to do that. That's the will of the people there. You got to want to do that because you're going to take some shots.
No, as well said. He is Brian Smith. Covered a lot of ground today, but it was a really good one. Always fun to have Brian on when we can talk about defensive line recruiting in a good way.
That's the only time we've ever done it. Let's be honest.
I know. I don't even know what to do now. Like, is that the last show we have? Is that, or are we all leading up to this point?
The end of the series. It's over.
Yeah, we finally did it. Anyway, he is Brian Smith. Great insight as always, FB Scout_Florida. I'm Ryan Harings. Thank you for tuning in. As always, really do appreciate it. On Wisconsin, and we will talk later.